It's all about Victoria again. They keep moving to record highs. We've got a baby now who's infected. At the other end of the age spectrum, you've got the aged care centres that COVID's flooding through it. I mean, is now the time to start looking at stage 4?
I think it is, and I think there are people in the federal government who believe that. But the great shame of it, Peter, is it's because of the Victorian government's failures that they're at that point. I mean, we keep reporting, and I'll have some more on Afternoon Agenda today, about how in regional Victoria and Colac, and you can only imagine this would be happening in other areas, it's taking 9 or 10 days for people to get their test results back. How can you trace their contacts, who they were in contact with when they contracted the virus, when they started showing symptoms, when they were spreading the thing, if it's taking that long to get the test results back? In New South Wales, it's an average of 24 hours. I know a lot of people have had the test and have certainly had a result back in 36 hours. And there it's 9 days. I mean, what a failure. And that's on top of the quarantining failure, which let this thing out in the first place. So there are rumblings around the place about can the feds become more involved. We know the army's going in, but there are rumblings too of a harder lockdown. And Dan Andrews keeps putting it onto the populace, not obeying the rules, not wearing masks, any other scapegoat. But he's got to admit that his system's failed him.
What is the difference, the fundamental differences between what's going on in Victoria and what's going on in New South Wales? Because we had the outbreak at, what was it, about 2 weeks ago now, right, at the Crossroads Hotel. So we would have started to have seen quite a rise by now if it wasn't under control. But it's still only in the teens, which suggests that things, I don't want to put the mockers on it here, but it does it does seem like it's under control in New South Wales. So what's going wrong in Victoria then?
I just think that they're not up to it. I mean, what other conclusion can you come to? I mean, we don't get a satisfactory answer because Danielle Andrews says everyone's getting tested within 48 hours. Well, that's not true. No. Demonstrably not true by some of the correspondence we've been putting on Sky News. So I just think clearly the health department there is not up to it. Brett Sutton hasn't done the job he should have. They haven't been staffed properly. They haven't done the contact tracing in the way they should have. They should have asked for help earlier. And that's on top of the fact they didn't have police in charge of the quarantining operation. They had health. So, I mean, they're putting the whole nation and the whole national economy at risk.
You got to wonder if I know that Scott Morrison has to maintain a united front publicly, but you got to wonder if there's tensions behind the scenes now.
There is, but I think it's more with the federal ministers and the Victorian government. I think Morrison and Andrews have a pretty good relationship. And Morrison was stressing again yesterday when I asked him about the press conference in Sydney that his job is to support Victoria. He can't take over the thing, and frankly, the Army's not training contact tracing the way health officials are, but perhaps they could get some more help from New South Wales, even though they've got their own problems to deal with, at least in terms of setting up the regime properly. They certainly need more manpower in terms of the testing. Something is going wrong there.
Well, and there's still no word of when the peak might be. Greg Hunt didn't know today when I asked him about it, but the state health officer thought that maybe the peak was going to be yesterday and it would start to come down, I guess.
It's very optimistic from the figures we've seen, isn't it?
Yeah.
And remember, I think that the figures we're seeing are probably 6 or 7 days after what they actually are because of this lag in testing. I think, you know, what happens if you went to a 6-week lockdown, shut even more businesses and still didn't kill the thing off? Has it gone too far? That's the real scary aspect to all of this.
Meanwhile, we've got a Black Lives Matter protest taking place in Sydney today. I mean, do you envisage trouble down there today? I mean, I don't know what the weather's like outside at the moment. Maybe it'll do its work.
Yeah, well, that is helpful.
Yeah.
And we know that less people show up when they're actually banned by the court. We know that when the Court of Appeal said it was OK, thousands showed up and it was more like hundreds the last time when it was, because people don't want an $1,100 fine, do they? So, look, there could be some ugly confrontations. Mick Fuller, the New South Wales Commissioner, he told us last week, definitely going to issue those fines.
Yeah.
The organisers are saying, well, we're allowed to congregate in the park for lunch, but, I mean, how's that really going to work?
Yeah. Well, it's a bit of a grey area, that, is it?
Yeah. But if there's only hundreds, it's not as big a public health risk.
Yeah.
And hopefully it doesn't turn into an ugly situation.
A couple of interesting stories that are in the papers this morning. Clive Palmer apparently getting ready to mount some kind of advertising blitz in the lead up to October? Are you expecting a return of the United Australia Party in some capacity? What's he playing at here, do you think?
Well, I just think he loves the attention and the power and the influence. And the Labor Party review of the federal election said that his advertising campaign, mammoth campaign, actually helped all our media outlets.
Yeah, Matt Canavan was on the show a short time ago. He said it may have played the part.
Well, that's what the Labor review found.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, at the very least, it could have been a situation that without that campaign, Morrison was in minority as opposed to majority government. He might still be in government, but it could have meant, you know, 2 or 3 seats, and that's all he's got. So it could have an influence in Queensland. But I think, I mean, we were just discussing off air, I think Palaszczuk's flying.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not all over. You know, I hear from Queensland Labor people who are still a bit pessimistic. It might be a minority government situation. She might suffer losses in North Queensland, for example, because of the border closures. But
well, the jobless rates up in North Queensland are
massive, right?
Yeah.
So, but Deb Frecklington went out, said open the borders. Palaszczuk kept them shut. And that was a risky political strategy for her in terms of the economy. But the research backed up Queenslanders wanted that. And when Victoria happened, that was really what clinched it for her, in my view, if she wins the election, because that justified her decision.